Live right here on the early line, we welcome you to hour number 3 to start off this new week, bright and early on a Monday morning. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. Firmly in the NBA All-Star break after All-Star weekend. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No games around the association. We pick up play once again on Thursday. It's a big Monday night in college basketball following a monumental weekend in college hoops as well. All of that here in our third and final hour up until 11 a.m. Eastern.
And by the way, what about the Daytona 500? Should it be hour number 3 down in Daytona for us, maybe live on the scene? Do we have any boots on the ground from the Daytona 500, which got rained out yesterday, Ben? That's what my question is.
In Indianapolis,
Ranieri,
I believe our closest host, probably Joe. Yeah, probably Ranieri. We would send him out there, be my guess. Brady Cannon, I think, does a lot of NASCAR coverage, if I'm not mistaken. That's all. Jim Saunas, who doesn't work for SportsGrid specifically, but with the FanDuel Sportsbook, he's a great NASCAR handicapper. A delay because of weather in Indy, I believe. A lot of rainfall and the snow this weekend for All-Star weekend pushes back the Daytona. Wait, Daytona's in Florida. What am I saying? I'm thinking the Indianapolis 500.
Ben's a West Coast guy. Yeah, Ben's a West Coast guy. Don't worry about it. Syracuse educated.
Never been to Florida. Yeah, never been to Florida. Going for the first time in just a couple of weeks. Donnie Rightside, be by himself, March 7th and March 8th. Yeah.
Wait. Yeah. You just said you've never been to Florida. Is that a true story? You've never been to Florida? Wow.
Let's welcome in that SportsGrid radio audience first to make sure they're here for this conversation. Sirius XM Channel 159, all of our radio terrestrial affiliates. He is Donnie, I am Ben, and myself, Ben Stevens. No, I have never been to Florida. Growing up in California, what's the point of going to Florida? I have the sunshine. I have better weather. It's not humid. There's no alligators. Why would I ever go to the Sunshine State?
But you got to go to Disney World. Like, Disneyland doesn't count. Disney World is the only one that counts. Like, nobody ever said, like, hey, when I see, like, the Super Bowl commercials and, like, we're going to Disneyland, I'm like, who the hell wants to go to Disneyland? You got to go to Disney World.
Disneyland's the original. I'm not really going to argue this. I'm not the biggest fan of roller coasters and amusement parks, so it's not really one that resonates with me individually, but that's fine. But everything else, California has the upper hand on Florida.
And they got Rick out there, too, so there you go. It's a big win. It's a big win out there.
My father or Hora in Florida?
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Come on, yo. Ooh, that's it now. Okay. You would
Rick Power Rankings. Rick Stevens takes it time and again. Donnie Rightside met Rick Stevens. Ricky Steve joined us in Las Vegas for a little fun as we were getting ready for Super Bowl week. So I think you can unequivocally say, Donnie, that Rick Stevens has the upper hand over Rick Hora.
Absolutely. That's some of the best water I've ever had at a meal in my life. So it was the time of my life at that, meeting Mr. Rick out there. Comped. Fantastic, wonderful gentleman. And there you go. And it was comped all the way around. Fantastic time. So, so Rick in California, Rick in Florida, I mean, that may be up for debate later on. We'll see.
No, I think it's a runaway victory for my father. All right, back to the NBA Finals forecast that we ended out hour number 2 with by asking the public, which NBA Championship Series matchup do you think is most likely here at the All-Star break? We gave you some of the shortest options. We want a little bit of variety. Celtics and the Nuggets tied for the shortest price alongside the Celtics and the Clippers, both plus 550. Bucks and the Clippers, the same as the Bucks and the Nuggets at 12-1. And then the Celtics versus the Suns, the Celtics versus the Timberwolves, 16-1 for Boston versus Phoenix, 17-1 for Boston versus Minnesota. Those are the two best records in the NBA. Boston and Denver, the two best prices to win the NBA title this year. Most of the public, Donnie, in the Fade the Public poll, going with the C's and the Nugs. That was not the rematch from a season ago. It was the Nuggets and the Heat. Boston, of course, in to the Eastern Conference Finals. You selected, as did I, Donnie, the Celtics versus the Suns. I believe Boston is going to win the East just based on where things stand to go through the Celtics, who have the best home record, who more than likely are going to be the number 1 overall seed in the East, already with a 6-game cushion for that top spot. Pretty tough to knock off Boston at this moment. And then I think the Suns can make a rally in the Western Conference. Most difficult schedule remaining in this home stretch following the All-Star break all around the NBA, but I think they'll be tuned up and ready to go for the playoffs. I at least have an NBA championship ticket on Phoenix at this moment.
Yeah, it's what we talked about too with the Milwaukee Bucks. There's so much talent on that basketball team. They have won a world championship with Giannis here, but the question marks arise where you had a coach that had a great record. You fired him. You move on the dock. Is that going to be improvement here? Because I think in this poll, you could probably line up Celtics versus whoever and do that 4 times repeated and get some pretty good, numbers. Because why? A lot of people just think it's going to be the Celtics automatically out of the East. But that's why you get some of those elevated tickets here. You take a look at the Bucks. If it is the Clippers, which again, it would be a great matchup in the finals at a 12-1 price. But those are where the question marks start to come into it, because outside of the All-Star break and heading down the stretch toward the playoffs, we don't have those questions here about the Boston Celtics. But that's why we talked about the Bucks. You're saying if they can catch fire, it's a team with pedigree that has won a world championship. And can they overtake the Boston Celtics in the playoffs? The one thing that's going to be tough to do is, for a while, it looked like the Boston Celtics might go unbeaten on their home floor here in the playoffs, in the regular season heading into the playoffs, because they haven't lost any games at home. They've lost a few now. So maybe if you're a road team, okay, we've seen them lose a few games here. Maybe we could do some damage, but it is going to be really hard to overthrow the Celtics at this point. But if it's one team that can do it, you still probably can't give up on the Bucks here in the East.
You cannot, right? Milwaukee has the talent. They have Giannis. They have Damian Lillard. Might an all-star break and a win for the East, captained by Giannis, with Doc Rivers as the head coach and the MVP award going to Dame, propel them? Probably not. There's not a correlation there necessarily. But Milwaukee still has the third best record in the Eastern Conference at 35-21, despite being just 3-7 in the 10 games under Glenn Doc Rivers. But there is his inability as a head coach to perform in the postseason. We'll see what happens for the Bucks. I think the Eastern Conference, the way it sets up right now, Donnie, it's almost like the NFC Championship prices for the San Francisco 49ers toward the tail end of the regular season into the playoffs. San Francisco pretty much got close to even money by the time we entered the playoffs. That's where Boston already is, plus 120 for the C's to win the Eastern Conference crown. By the way, we'll look at conference championship odds in the National Football League. New markets out over the weekend in just a little bit. But I think it's Boston, a peg above everybody else in the East. The West is much more interesting. A jumbled picture with the two teams at the top, Minnesota and OKC, I think are going to factor into the playoff noise.
Yeah, and again, we have a lot to still be determined here heading down the stretch, which includes which teams are going to stay healthy, because your point there with the Clippers, you tell me right now, the Clippers are playing good basketball and healthy entering into the playoffs, I'm going to buy back in. But we know, as in past performance here, and guys that haven't been able to show up in the playoffs, not performance-wise, but injury-wise, that's the Clippers dead on it here. So the Clippers just might be this true wild card in this whole scenario, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely so, because there is the injury concerns that we have seen plague Los Angeles in times past, and James Harden in the playoffs as well. Conference title odds in the NFL for next year. Next.
Best player in the NBA until proven otherwise. Like, you have that guy on your team, you win 50 games, it's really that simple.
There is voter fatigue, and I think that is the only thing you have to be careful about when you deal with the NBA is there voter fatigue in regards to who should win the MVP? When you look at the odds, and obviously you get, no Halliburton.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8, right? This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8. 6 you lose, 7 you push, 8 you win. So it's going to come down to the end.
And he missed the 3, and they are not going to foul. They're not going to foul. He just drove and scored, though. Oh, they gave up a dunk with 14.1 to go.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, Trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It felt during the year that there was a little bit of disconnect with Wilks and Kyle Shanahan. The total points allowed by Steve Wilks' defense the last 3 years before this, head coach for the Cardinals, they gave up the 26th most points. Defensive coordinator for the Browns, 20th most points. And then Carolina, they gave up the 19th most points.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on a Monday on the early line. The day is Monday, February 19th. It's President's Day weekend, but we're already looking forward to next year in the National Football League because over this weekend, conference championship odds have become available on the lovely FanDuel Sportsbook. We had the Super Bowl 59 prices. We had NFL MVP odds for next year. Now we dive even deeper into the conference perspective for 2024 in the National Football League. We start with the NFC, where the San Francisco 49ers are already a very short favorite. It is February, Donnie, and San Francisco has a plus 230 price to win the NFC Championship. Less than a 2.5 to 1 number at plus 230. Less than half of everybody else around the NFC. Is that too drastically short on San Francisco before this offseason even really plays out?
Yes, it's way too drastically short here at this point because there is something called that Super Bowl hangover. It is harder to get back to the Super Bowl the following season. The NFL makes it harder on you, whether it's going to be a salary cap issue that you're going to have, whether you don't get that top draft pick that you always wanted, and also now you're going to play a first-place schedule as you move forward. And, oh, yeah, your running back who's notoriously being known for getting a lot of carries and being injured when completely healthy basically through this season, he's not going to do it again next year. That's a crazy price to pay, at least right now, plus 230, Ben.
You're tying up your money for nearly 11 and a half months on a plus 230 price before a single snap of football has even been played, before we have done anything in the offseason outside of the coaching carousel. That's a drastically short number. I don't disagree with the 49ers being booked as the favorites once again. They've been in the NFC Championship game 4 of the previous 5 seasons. They've appeared in 2 of the last 5 Super Bowls, but that's a really short price. But one of the good things about a short price on one means then there is value on others. There's just going to be longer odds than maybe the market really needs to have at this point. So the Lions in the Cowboys tied for the second best price at 6 to 1. The Eagles fourth best number at plus 800. The Packers round out the top 5 at 10 to 1. Where would your value pick be at this moment, Donnie, knowing, again, it's late February of 2024, but where would that value lie with you? I know where I'm going.
Yeah, to be honest, it's probably going to be, and it's not really a homer pick for me, the Philadelphia Eagles, because you like the team that's on that wave that, sort of crashed down at the end of the season. And you say moving forward, like, what can you anticipate? Well, again, the schedule's probably going to look decently tough here. The Eagles were okay last year. Why? Because they had a great start, but sort of crashed down the stretch. But the one thing that was always plaguing the Eagles was, hey, what happened to Jalen Hurts at this point? Why wasn't he as good down the stretch as he was the previous year? Well, Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator / quarterback coach, really didn't help his cause here and cause a lot of confidence in the room, if you would like. They were talking about maybe more of a friendlier friendship here as opposed to a coach / player relationship. Now you move on to get Kellen Moore. That's an instant upgrade right here. The defense, who couldn't look, sometimes in the NFL, it's not always about the players on the field. You have to have a great scheme, some great X's and O's. The Eagles obviously had 0 X's and O's last year on defense. Vic Fangio comes in. So I do think the Eagles are a better version already without even adding into the offseason just by making those coaching decisions here. So I look at the Eagles last year. If you had said, hey, by the way, Eagles an 8-1 price here to win the NFC, you'd have jumped right on it. I think the Eagles will have a quality season next year, and I think that price point is valid to take away. So for me, looking at that next tier of teams, it's the Eagles for me that probably make the most sense just based on that price point here, Ben.
Me as well. I think Philadelphia is going to be back in the NFC Championship game next year at an 8-1 number. I think the big issue for Nick Sirianni and crew this year was the drop-off in coordinators. So who do you go out and get at the offensive coordinator? Kellen Moore, who I still think is one of the bright stars in terms of offensive play calling in the National Football League. And in my estimation, Donnie, there is no better defensive coordinator that you can have to focus strictly on defense than Vic Fangio, who makes his way back to Philadelphia. I think that is going to be key for the Eagles. We'll get back into those NFC title odds in just a moment, but a bit of breaking news here during the NBA All-Star break on this Monday morning. The Brooklyn Nets, after a 21-33 start to this season, have fired head coach Jacques Vaughn. Of course, he became the interim head coach early last year in November after Steve Nash was fired from Brooklyn following a chaotic beginning to last season and a tenure really for this Nets organization. Jacques Vaughn last year in 75 games, 43-32. The Nets were a playoff team, swept, of course, after a ton of changes and at the trade deadline, getting rid of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, but they still made the playoffs, swept by the Philadelphia 76ers. With that young core this year, it's been a year of struggles, 12 games below 500. Brooklyn makes a change at their head coaching spot. The Nets dismissing Jacques Vaughn on this Monday morning.
Yeah, good luck to the next head coach that comes in here and then will be dismissed in a year and a half as well. But that's the job of the NBA. You're hired to be fired. So maybe in the grand scheme of things, Jacques Vaughn did win because he probably got a 3 to 4 year deal. He'll get paid out probably at least another 2 years. He'll get to go coach another NBA team and be on the bench there and try to see if he can be a head coach once again in the association. That is a tough, unless you are one of the teams that is supposed to win. And you know who was supposed to win? Milwaukee. You know what their coach did? Have one of the best records in the NBA and still got fired only a couple months into his tenure. That's just the life of a head coach in the NBA. Don't feel bad for these guys. They get paid well to get fired.
Yeah, the Brooklyn Nets had so much optimism, of course, over the past few seasons, having the big three, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. They hardly ever played together, a failed experiment inside the Barclays Center. But the Nets now are going to be at the bottom of the NBA. It will be interesting in the big market that is Brooklyn and the greater New York City area, who they are able to lure and attract as that next head coach. Jacques Vaughn had been a member of the organization since 2016-17, 8 years as an assistant coach, was in his 9th year last year after Steve Nash was dismissed. Jacques Vaughn named the interim head coach, permanent head coach later into the year, and of course was the head coach to begin this season, 21-33. It feels as though changes are coming from the Nets moving forward, maybe in terms of the roster next season. That's going to be the case for Brooklyn. So, as things stand for the Nets, we'll continue to detail any further updates that come, who is named the interim head coach, and maybe some speculation for the full-time head coach moving forward. Back to the NFC Championship odds that are now available in the National Football League. 8-1 price on the Eagles, I agree. Let's focus on the tied for second prices, Detroit and Dallas. The Lions, a historic 2023 NFL season. And the odds favorable once again after the retention, I should say, of Ben Johnson as the OC and Aaron Glenn on the other side as the defensive coordinator. Detroit reached an NFC Championship game for the first time in 32 years, had a 24-7 halftime lead trying to get to their first ever Super Bowl ultimately falling just short in disappointing fashion. The largest ever comeback in a conference championship game in NFL playoff history. The Cowboys have only known disappointment in the NFL postseason. And I will say the same thing I said at the beginning of last year, the same thing I said 2 years ago at this point. I am not going to bet my money, Donnie's money, my worst enemy's money, on the Cowboys to win a conference championship as they continue to fail to reach the conference championship. 13 years they have made the playoffs since their last Lombardi trophy in 1995. They have never once reached the NFC championship game in that span.
He's always going to be tough, but the thing I do like here is I guess Jerry's now putting on everybody on notice. We're not getting any contract extensions. Nobody's going to be looking towards that safety net of I have a couple more years to go, which includes your head coach and also your quarterback. The only question is here, is he actually going to push all those chips to the middle of the table and really bust up that salary cap to add another player or two to try to double down? If not, we're not trusting the Dallas Cowboys, Ben, as you said, and rightfully so. The question marks, though, do come up in Detroit, who I was all ready to kick that stone all the way down the street and say, hey, Detroit's going to be a long way for another NFC championship chance again. But the fact that Ben Johnson came back here, that is a massive win, maybe the biggest win of the offseason for any team in the NFC, just getting him back as your coach, not losing him to another organization. It'll be interesting to see how Jared Goff, again, getting an extension this offseason, how big it's going to be, and also how they can compete with that new upstart NFC North, which has a lot of younger teams now looking to make that next move, Ben.
The NFC up in the air, the AFC Gauntlet Conference Championship odds next.
Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA until proven otherwise. Like, you have that guy on your team, you win 50 games, it's really that simple.
There is voter fatigue, and I think that is the only thing you have to be careful about when you deal with the NBA is there voter fatigue in regards to who should win the MVP? When you look at the odds, and obviously you get, no Halliburton.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8, right? This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8. 6 you lose, 7 you push, 8 you win. So it's going to come down to the end.
And he missed the 3, and they are not going to foul. They're not going to foul. He just drove and scored, though. Oh, they gave up a dunk with 14.1 to go.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It felt during the year that there was a little bit of disconnect with Wilks and Kyle Shanahan. The total points allowed by Steve Wilks' defense the last 3 years before this, head coach for the Cardinals, they gave up the 26th most points, defensive coordinator for the Browns, 20th most points, and then Carolina, they gave up the 19th most points.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
AFC Championship odds now available on the lovely FanDuel Sportsbook, live right here on this Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. Of course, we start at the top. The two-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And Donnie, it might sound crazy to say, but at a plus 350 number right now, if you bet the Chiefs, you're feeling pretty good based on recent trends. They have played in the AFC Championship games each of the past 6 years. All 6 years that Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback, they have won the AFC title game, cashing that ticket to win an AFC Championship game 4 of the previous 6 NFL seasons. So again, kind of crazy to bet a plus 350 price right now and expect it to come to fruition. But that has been the story the last 6 years, at least 4 of the last 6 around the NFL.
Yeah, but when you're taking a look at the Chiefs here, they have Patrick Mahomes. So again, I should have just listened to that little, buzzer in my head pounding away at me going like, hey, Donnie, it doesn't matter what the other team has. They don't have Patrick Mahomes. So why not just use that throughout the entire landscape of the 2024 season where you see a plus 350 price? And you're right, Ben, you should be crazy at this point right now to bet the Kansas City Chiefs. When it's all said and done, you'll be sitting here in late December going like, it's a foregone conclusion. The Chiefs will be the number 1 overall seed, or even if they're not anymore, it doesn't matter because they have Mahomes on the win. Anywhere they go, they'll get the other team's worst coaching performance. They'll have their best coaching performance. They'll get all of the breaks on special teams. You'll get none of the breaks if you bet against them, and you just take Patrick Mahomes. So if you want to keep that theory, I can't argue with you anymore. But a plus 350 price and a plus 250 price, get out of town. It's the NFL. There's way too much variance and way too much injuries that can knock you off.
There's probably going to be a point throughout the regular season, both for the 49ers and the Chiefs, the two favorites in the respective conference title odds. You are going to get a longer number that would provide a bigger payday. They could grow shorter by the time we reach the postseason for both of those two teams. We expect to be a part of the conversation, but at some point throughout the NFL regular season or even into the playoffs where the Chiefs were 7-1 at certain points to win the AFC Championship, those numbers are going to be there. But it truly has been the Chiefs versus the field. 4 of the last 6 AFC Championships in Kansas City. Their 2 losses, one to Tom Brady in Mahomes' first year as a starting quarterback in overtime, one against the Cincinnati Bengals also in overtime. Those are the 2 losses where they failed to cash that ticket of the conference championship price to win the AFC. So now we look beyond Kansas City. Baltimore plus 460, second best number, backed by over $1. The Bills plus 650. We expect a healthy Joe Burrow will reinvigorate the Cincinnati Bengals, a 7-1 price, and the Dolphins round out the top 5 at 11-1. We'll look at the value outside of that in just a moment. But Donnie, same thing we just discussed for the Lions and the Cowboys. Questions about their overall postseason pedigree. Are those same questions there for Baltimore in Buffalo? The Ravens have failed to win an AFC championship with Lamar Jackson. He is 2-4 now in his playoff career. Of course, the Buffalo Bills have been bounced in the division around each of the past 3 seasons. They have not appeared in a Super Bowl or won an AFC championship in any of their 4 previous playoff trips. So do you have questions about the proven track record for both the Flock and the Bills?
Yes, because that's what they've shown us here. And last year, they could have vanquished it. Both of them could have done that yesterday. You might have even had me say, you know what? Take a look at the Buffalo Bills at home against the Kansas City Chiefs. They win that game by a field goal and then move on and take on the Baltimore Ravens, who the Baltimore Ravens then would beat the Buffalo Bills and move on to the Super Bowl. We'd be having this conversation by going, yeah, Buffalo showed in the playoffs they can handle the Kansas City Chiefs. And, the Baltimore Ravens showed in the playoffs they can actually win big football games and get to the Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. But it blew up right in our faces in both instances, so that's why we're questioning it. The one thing I do know next year, Baltimore is going to be an unbelievably talented, great regular season team as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy. Then we'll question the playoffs. But I am starting to buy a little bit more here on the Buffalo Bills because you're trying to extrapolate what you saw last year and move it forward, right? everything went right for the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, heck, they even got Mark Andrews back for the playoff run, which is something we weren't even expecting was going to happen, and that would just be a plus, and it didn't work. But the one thing with the Buffalo Bills are, Josh Allen's coming back. Let's just say he's healthy. Looks like you found yourself a ground game. Can Stephon Diggs step up and be that number one wide receiver we've accustomed him to being over the past couple years when he wasn't down the stretch? Let's add a quality number 2 wide receiver. You have a lot of talented tight ends, but the one thing that we can look forward to is Sean McDermott's defense next year. If they're not the walking wounded in a triage unit out there, they're going to be competitive and should have an extra boost in the playoffs. I'm not ready to give up when the Buffalo Bills, like it seems like, Ben, I'm ready to give up on the Baltimore Ravens.
Listen, it's going to be a very hard slate for every team in the AFC, including Kansas City. By the way, Baltimore naming Zach Orr, a former All-Pro linebacker in the NFL, only 31 years old, the new defensive coordinator to replace Mike McDonald, who now, of course, is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I would look at the Bengals. There is a proven track record. If Joe Burrow is healthy, a 7-1 price is always intriguing. But as Donnie and I have said multiple times, every quarterback in the AFC is 29 years old or younger, at least for those top 5, 6, 7 prices. Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, Burrow, Tagovailoa, Stroud, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. The list goes on and on. So there are questions about the Dolphins and their overall outlook. The Houston Texans, a ton of optimism, rightfully so, entering year number 2 under Stroud and head coach DeMeco Ryans. What does Jim Harbaugh do in Los Angeles? Always optimism and expectation for the Bolts. Can the Chargers finally match that with their performances on the field? And the team that was our focus in terms of the conference title odds, Super Bowl odds at this point last year, the New York Jets under Aaron Rodgers, who will be 40 years old at the start of 2024, coming off the torn Achilles at the very beginning of 2023. Beyond those prices, Donnie, that are in 3 digits, the Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, Bengals, where do you think the best bet is?
The one thing I do know is not the Jets at a 16-1 price. They just feel like a powder keg here, where if they start out 1-3 on the season, it's going to absolutely explode, even though they are an intriguing option. Because if you could say, hey, let's flash back 5 years, that's the Aaron Rodgers I get. Sure, who's not going to think they can be competitive with a chance at a one-off in the playoffs where they would be able to advance? But that's not where I'm going to go. If you take a look, though, what makes some sense, you're looking for the team that's on the rise up. And I do think it's the Houston Texans. You take a look at that 14-1 price. This was a team that was just trying to win here and won big games at the end of the season, and also being a team that competed for a divisional title outside of just a few people probably thought, wasn't one of them, that they could actually get to the playoffs by winning the division and possibly winning a football game. I didn't see that coming, and yet they were maybe a year or 2 ahead of the curve. So I'm looking forward to them improving and adding there to their payroll, which means maybe another legitimate wide receiver, maybe another running back in the room, another defender. They can do some damage. But that one team that you do take a look at here and say, look, things didn't go according to plan here this past season. And I'm looking at the Houston Texans in the same division, the divisional opponent, as in the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were so disheartening to me heading down the stretch where I thought they would run away with maybe even a legitimate chance at one point in the season, Ben, to possibly the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. And they crashed and burned, almost similar to what we saw for the Philadelphia Eagles. I look for them to retool with Doug Peterson here and maybe be a player next year. It's not to say that they can win the AFC outright, but the price point of 17-1 for the Jaguars, that's something, Ben, I'm looking forward to biting on.
Starting tomorrow, I am pretty sure, until Tuesday, March 5th, that is the franchise tag window. Josh Allen, not the quarterback in Buffalo, the edge rusher in Duval County for the Jags, will be one to follow for how Jacksonville retains him. The defense needed to step up for the Jaguars a season ago. It did not necessarily do that. The AFC South, an afterthought entering 2023, the Jags, and then who else was going to win maybe 6 or 7 games. Now maybe one of the more exciting divisions in the entire conference with Jacksonville, Houston. What is Anthony Richardson going to do in a full season in the NFL? The Titans are probably going to struggle, but Will Levis has some hope and optimism there at the quarterback position. The AFC North, I still believe, is going to be a very difficult division to win with a healthy Joe Burrow. Of course, the Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns. What are they going to do with Deshaun Watson? That remains to be seen. And what do the Steelers do? Arthur Smith, the new offensive coordinator. What does the quarterback situation look like in the Steel City? All to say, Donnie, it is not going to be easy to win any division in the AFC or a conference championship. And although I still think the Chiefs are going to win the AFC West, probably for a 9th consecutive season, and maybe the optimism will be just a little bit early on the Chargers, one thing we know about Jim Harbaugh, at whatever level he is coached at, FCS, FBS, National Football League, he is a program builder. I expect the Chargers to look better on the field this year than they did in any of the 3 years under Brandon Staley.
No, and I do as well. And it just starts about, a coach that's going to have you in the football game and say, well, what do you mean? Every coach gets him. No. I'm talking about when you have to make those decisions where the coaching staff makes them and the team look over and goes, you know what? I trust this play. Let's get after it. Have some fun. I think this 4th and 1 call is the right move here. That's all they need. How many times did the Chargers lose in the past 2 years under Brandon Staley because we were just questioning decisions? We won't question those decisions under Harbaugh, and that should be a good thing. But the question matters here. Is Harbaugh going to be able to tangle there with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? And if he can, we're going to look at an awesome rivalry over the next 5 years, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely so. And that's also a part of it. These numbers you see right here, right now, barring injuries, trades, acquisitions, whatever it might be, at least based on the quarterback position, these could be the prices next offseason, and the next one after that, and the next one after that, given how young every quarterback is in the AFC and the route they have to go, still through Arrowhead and those Kansas City Chiefs led by Patrick Mahomes. It's just a reality of the situation in the AFC as of this moment. College basketball on this Monday night, less than 4 weeks out from Selection Sunday. We break down some matchups on the other side of the break here on the Early Line.
Player in the NBA until proven otherwise. Like you have that guy on your team, you win 50 games. It's really that simple.
There is voter fatigue, and I think that is the only thing you have to be careful about when you deal with the NBA. Is there voter fatigue in regards to who should win the MVP? When you look at the odds, and obviously you get, no Halliburton.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8, right? This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8. 6 you lose, 7 you push, 8 you win. So it's going to come down to the end.
And he missed the 3, and they are not going to foul. They're not going to foul. He just drove and scored, though. Oh, they gave up a dunk with 14.1 to go.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It felt during the year that there was a little bit of disconnect with Wilks and Kyle Shanahan. The total points allowed by Steve Wilks' defense the last 3 years before this, head coach for the Cardinals, they gave up the 26th most points, defensive coordinator for the Browns, 20th most points, and then Carolina, they gave up the 19th most points.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
A big Monday in college basketball, a holiday weekend, a huge slate on the women's side, and a couple of marquee matchups in terms of those top 25 tilts on the men's side. That is featured in Houston tonight. It's the Cougs, who might be ranked second by the time we tip tonight in H-Town against another top 10 team in Iowa State. Both holding serve this weekend at home in action early on Saturday. Quick turnaround on this Monday night. As of right now, it's a top 10 tilt between the Cougs and the Cyclones. A 9.5-point spread in favor of Houston. The over-under, 127.5. Donnie, these are the two top teams in the very competitive Big 12 conference title race. 9-3 Houston, 9-3 Iowa State. Tonight's winner will be in pole position. How do you see it playing out in H-Town?
It's going to be a mess. And the reason I bring that up is we're going to break down the defensive components for both of these teams, which are very good. You take a look at the Big 12, which does play great defense. Number one overall in efficiency on defense, it's Houston. Number two, it's Iowa State. So if we're asking which way do I think this is going to go, even though that total is ultra low, I think there's a really good chance that we hit the under, as opposed to saying, Donnie, are you more confident picking here Iowa State and or Houston in this game? If we look at these defensive footprints, obviously I just told you, they're both very efficient, but styles make fights here. You take a look at some teams like, hey, you know what? This team likes to shoot the three-point shot, Ben. Well, this team will let you shoot the three-point shot, and we'll see if you can make amends on that. That's almost the opposite in this game. You're taking a look at a team like, let's just say Iowa State on offense, which is 12th in conference play at three-point attempts out of 14 teams. Well, you say to yourself, okay, well, what's the matchup here? Well, how about this? Houston actually lets you shoot a ton of three-point shots. So now we're saying, okay, well, Iowa State doesn't like to shoot threes, but Houston's going to let you shoot them. Well, that's a mismatch right there because we really don't want to shoot threes. Well, let's flip it down and say, well, Ben, how do these two teams do inside the paint? And just looking from an Iowa State perspective on offense versus Houston on defense, you take a look at point production here. Number two overall in point distribution inside the arc in conference play is Iowa State. Great. Let's see how we can beat down Houston down low. Well, how about this? 12th overall point distribution out of 14 teams on defense is Houston. They don't just let you get those easy buckets here. So that's a mismatch here. They say, ooh, that's not going to be a very nice combination where styles make fights. Flip it over quickly here to Houston on offense. They do pretty much the same thing. They don't like to shoot a lot of three-point shots on offense. 11th in conference play out of 14 teams. We don't let you shoot more three-point shots than anybody in conference play. It's Iowa State. So Houston doesn't want to shoot a ton of three-point shots, but they're forcing them. And then let's do the same thing, Ben. Take a look down inside the paint. Who's fourth in point distribution here at scoring inside the three-point arc? It's Houston. But how about this? Who's the least stingiest team on defense here? That is Iowa State's defense. So I'm looking forward to the under. Why? Because if styles make fights, this style doesn't make any sort of fight here from an offensive perspective, Ben.
Completely agree. It's a low number. It's 127.5. Houston has won 8 of its last 9 games, going over in 6 of those 9. The totals are always 135 or less for any game the Cougs are going to play in. So those haven't been tremendously high-scoring or high-tempo affairs. Houston is the most efficient defense in college basketball. According to Ken Palm, Iowa State third most efficient. Iowa State is 9-3 straight up in Big 12 play. The Cyclones are also the best cover team in the Big 12 Conference, 9-3 against the spread as well. 5-2 ATS as an underdog this year. The Clones have won 4 straight games. They have covered in 5 straight games, 3 times as a dog, under in 4 of those 5. Not only do I believe the defensive intensity is going to be ratcheted up tonight, Houston, by the way, was knocked off in Hilton Coliseum by Iowa State just over a month and a half ago, and that game stayed well under its pregame number. I think the defensive intensity will be there at an all-time high, but also a really quick turnaround, Donnie, from playing Saturday afternoon for both of these teams. Iowa State against Texas Tech. Houston blew out Texas by 21 points. Quick turnaround, big Monday, early game here on this Monday evening, or at least a game on this Monday evening. I go under 127 and a half as well. I think Iowa State can keep this game within that 9.5-point margin. I do think Houston wins outright, however.
Yes, and I do agree with you there in that spec, because if you're taking a look at a high total here, it sort of doesn't mesh because you don't have a lot of wiggle room to cover that spread and also stay under that total. I look for this game to be played in the 60s on both sides, the lower 60s here. And as you pointed out, hey, look, one team could get hot from three-point range. Hey, we're really going to change our stripes in this game and, make 11 of 22 three-point shot attempts. We're just not expecting that. That tempo is going to be slow, and this game means a lot too, because when you take a look, Ben, at the standings, it's not like, hey, one team's fighting for respectability. Last time I checked, both teams 9-3 in the Big 12. This is going to go a long way to determine the regular season conference championship as well. So added stakes usually ramps up the pressure on each and every offensive possession.
Again, 9-3, both straight up and against the spread for Iowa State. The only team in the Big 12 covering in more than 68% of their games. That's a 75% cover clip for the Cyclones, something TJ Otzelberger has done for Iowa State in his 3 years in Ames. Another Big 12 battle tonight between Texas and K-State. Both teams losing over the weekend. The Longhorns return to Austin after a dismal road trip to H-Town. Texas has struggled in Big 12 play this year, 5-7, despite a very talented roster that made quite a deep run under Rodney Terry a year ago. When you look at the line, 8.5, Donnie, in favor of Texas. That's a very strong Texas number. Oftentimes we talk about reading the lines for a Big 12 basketball game or any conference matchup. This one, a very strong Texas price.
It is a very strong Texas price, but I'm actually going to bite on the underdog here. And both of these teams, as you said, not playing great basketball coming in. You look at Kansas State, losers of 6 of 7 games. Texas, losers of their past 4 of 6. So it's not as if we're coming in on those high crests saying, I'm just going to ride that wave here of emotion and say, you know what? Home court advantage should be able to carry for Texas. Not to say Texas can't win this game. They're favored to win in close to double digits, but I'm going to take the points, and here's why. You take a look at Kansas State, not a very good offense. If you're looking for efficiency, they don't have it, Ben. They're 14th in conference play at turning the basketball over out of 14 teams and 13 in overall efficiency. But the one thing that they do like to do is chuck the three-point shot. How many times do we talk about that? You want an equalizer for an underdog going on the road? Make your three-point shots. Now, having said that, if there's one team that loves to chase you up the three-point line more than any other team in the Big 12, it is Texas. However, if you can get those shots off from three-point range, you know who's the worst team in conference play defending the three-point shot? It's the Texas Longhorns at close to 37%. So there alone, I think, makes some sense. But also, Kansas, as bad as they are on offense, they're actually very good on defense, coming in number 3 overall in efficiency in conference play, which includes defending that three-point line at close to 29%, which is tremendous. And also, inside the arc, number 2 in conference play, only giving up about 46%. But also, Texas not being able to take advantage of the fact that Kansas State fouls. If you take a look in conference play, again, 14 teams in the Big 12, 13th at fouling, that's Kansas State. But you know also is 13th at getting to the line? It's Texas. If you can't take advantage of that, where is your overall advantage? I'll take the 8.5 points just based on the matchup here that I think could win out. Kansas State from the three-point line. Just be average tonight, and you'll stay within that 8.5 number. I'll take the points.
K-State has covered in each of its last 2 games, booked as a dog. They lost at the buzzer against TCU and Jameer Nelson Jr. on Saturday. That's how we can feel a little bit old. So when we look at the Big 12 title odds, Houston is the odds-on favorite, minus 180. 9-3, they take on the other 9-3 team in Iowa State tonight, plus 170 for the Cyclones. But again, Houston booked as a 9.5-point home favorite against Iowa State. Virginia's still in the running for an ACC title. The Cavaliers have won 9 of their previous 10 games, had an 8-game win streak snapped last week at home against the Pittsburgh Panthers. Keep an eye on what Pittsburgh is doing right now. It's an all-Commonwealth battle tonight, this one in Blacksburg, between Virginia Tech and UVA. And the Hokies, a 3.5-point home favorite. Again, the line is the line for a reason, but Virginia winning at home on Saturday, Donnie, against Wake Forest. The final score, 49-47. That's Tony Bennett basketball, baby.
No, it certainly is. And it's crazy that you look at those numbers here and how they're actually playing out, because one team coming in red hot, maybe take down an ACC championship, Virginia Tech losing a little bit of steam, but still the favorite here. So if you're just biting on lines, it's certainly a Virginia Tech line. But here's why I do think Virginia Tech is the right side here. 5th overall in conference play in efficiency. But that doesn't really tell the tale. They're actually number 1 overall in effective field goal percentage. And here's why. Because they're incredible inside the arc. Number 1 in conference play, shooting close to 55% inside of the arc, but also from beyond the arc, close to 38%. And here's what we like. There are 15 teams in the ACC. 13th at allowing you to shoot the three-point shot. It's Virginia's pack line defense. They don't want you in the paint. They want you shooting three-point shots, which is exactly where Virginia Tech loves to be here. So I do think they'll make their fair share and win this game. The one interesting matchup, though, however, is we talk about Virginia Tech's volume from three-point range, and they should be able to shoot as many shots as they want from the perimeter. But Virginia's offense is actually number 1 in ACC play at shooting 40% clip as a team here. But also, if there's 15 teams, they're 14th at volume from three-point range. So they don't use that altogether to their advantage. I look for a big game here for Virginia Tech. If you're just line shopping and looking at this one, it's a stone cold Tech line. I'll go with Tech here because I do believe they'll make more three-point shots than Virginia does tonight, and that should be the end-all be-all.
Listen, entering this weekend, I haven't tallied up the changes that we may have seen in these scenarios from Saturday and Sunday, but entering this Saturday, an unranked home team against a ranked opponent. Now, Virginia did lose last week against Pitt. We'll see if that affects their ranking as we get the new AP poll coming out in just about an hour. But an unranked home team hosting a ranked opponent. They are 21-14 straight up this year, 18-17 against the spread. Again, Virginia Tech is the home favorite tonight, laying 3.5 points against UVA. Marquee basketball today in the women's ranks on this holiday weekend. Top 20 tilt in stores between UConn and Creighton. Paige Beckers delighting the crowd for the Huskies late last week, announcing she is going to return for another season. A college career so optimistic, filled with prowess that has been derailed by injury. A big one in the Big Ten. Keep an eye on Indiana. The reigning national champs, LSU, on the road against A&M. Notre Dame taking on Duke inside Cameron. That big top 20 tilt, Creighton versus UConn on the women's side today. We return favor in Omaha between the men's side, Creighton and UConn tomorrow. The Huskies have won 14 straight.
Yeah, back and forth they go. And also, you brought up some of these games, too. The one missed out, the number 13 LSU squad here, which is kind of intriguing that they're so far down, lying in the weeds outside of the top 10, so much talent. And can they pull it together going against A&M tonight? So an interesting thought process here. We talk so much about the men's game here, but we're going to have a nice little spotlight here on that women's game coming down the stretch here. And that should include LSU, because I remember we were talking about a Friday, like, some of these top 10 teams. I actually forgot that LSU wasn't even ranked in the top 10. So another team on top of that pile of a great top 10 here in women's basketball.
Don Staley, South Carolina Gamecocks remain unbeaten. Down at the break yesterday. I bet them live laying 10.5 against Georgia. They respond winning 70-56, a perfect 23-0. Caitlin Clark, a historic week. Of course, her Iowa Hawkeyes, as you look at the national title odds, third best price at 7-1, behind both South Carolina and the defending champs, LSU. So many good teams out of the Pac-12. Donnie, did you see Friday night in Corvallis between Oregon State and UCLA? 4 lead changes in the final, I think, 6.9 seconds of regulation. It was wild. The Bruins 20-1. Stanford 15-1. UConn, by the way, today laying 18.5 at home against the Creighton Blue Jays. Ohio State out of the Big Ten, 25-1, second-ranked team in the country. Some best bets on this Monday coming your way up next.
Player in the NBA until proven otherwise. Like, you have that guy on your team, you win 50 games, it's really that simple.
There is voter fatigue, and I think that is the only thing you have to be careful about when you deal with the NBA is there voter fatigue in regards to who should win the MVP? When you look at the odds, And obviously you get, no Halliburton.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8, right? This is going to fall 6, 7, or 8. 6 you lose, 7 you push, 8 you win. So it's going to come down to the end.
And he missed the 3, and they are not going to foul. They're not going to foul. He just drove and scored, though. Oh, they gave up a dunk with 14.1 to go.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It felt during the year that there was a little bit of disconnect with Wilks and Kyle Shanahan. The total points allowed by Steve Wilks' defense the last 3 years before this, head coach for the Cardinals, they gave up the 26th most points. Defensive coordinator for the Browns, 20th most points. And then Carolina, they gave up the 19th most points.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Closing out our 3 hours together live right here on this Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben. He is Donnie, and this is the SportsGrid app. It should never leave your side because available for download at the Apple and the Play Store. In that SportsGrid app, you can just scan the QR code as well. 5-star plays, those are known as best bets. And so are these. To end out this holiday weekend, to start off a new week, we find you some profitability, I believe, in college basketball. No NBA action. Spring training starts pretty soon, but college hoops is our focus. Before we say farewell and goodbye, it is time for bye, bye, bye. Donnie right side, give the people a game plan. What's the best bet on this Monday?
Yeah, we got a best bet, and then we got a bonus bet here. Let's start with the best bet. We just broke it down, Kansas State and Texas here. I'm going to bite and take the public side here at the plus 8.5 for Kansas State, led to believe that they will have a decent night shooting from three-point range, and their defense will be enough to stifle Texas so we can get a close game. Maybe they win, maybe they don't, but I'm thinking they cover the 8.5. And also, how about this double down? Little Brad Keselowski here for the Indianapolis 500, as Ben would say, but as we know, it is the Daytona 500 today. Keselowski has been tremendous down there. Just don't check the records, or if he even has been tremendous, just take my word for it. Keselowski, he's been tremendous, 12-1 price. Let's go.
Who is this guy? An NHL sharp betting the Stadium Series 2-for-2 hit. Now going to the Daytona 500, not in Indianapolis, down in Florida. What a look for Donnie Rightside to give you a bonus bet. I go to the marquee matchup in women's college hoops today, a top 20 tilt in Connecticut between UConn and Creighton. The Huskies, under Gino Auriemma, a perfect 14-0 in Big East play this year. They have won all 14 games by at least 15 points, 13 of the 14 by 20 or more, which would cover an 18.5-point spread against Creighton. Average margin of victory for Connecticut in conference action, 34.2 points per game. Lay the 18 and a hook, albeit a big spread with UConn. Donnie and I will see you tomorrow, a Tuesday, starting at 8 a.m. Eastern.